Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of three. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you're notified every week with my new podcast on Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you haven't already, join my free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. There is no downside. I teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health, and you will be a part of a like-minded group to support you on your journey in addition to truly taking control of your health. My goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So please help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need my help. I'm so excited. And this man I am indebted to because he's been feeding my family, and my family loves it. And they don't want to go out to restaurants because the food's so good. And we're going to get into that in a minute. Sean Graese grew up in northwestern Wisconsin with bison in the backyard, the West and wildlife, and now his family has been raising, processing, and distributing 100% grass-fed bison for over 20 years. So we're going to get into his story. Welcome, Sean. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm wonderful.
So I want to give everyone just a little background on my experience with your company. Pre-COVID, I've been getting meat delivered to my house because I wanted organic, grass-fed, and this is before things got even worse. And then the shipping costs were getting pretty expensive with some of the companies I was using. So I then reached out to a couple different companies around the country and tried different things, and sticker price along with some other shipping costs. That was not, favorable. And then just the taste wasn't good. So then I came across your company and realized that Northstar Bison isn't just bison. It's got everything that you could possibly want, but the shipping cost, the packaging, and the quality of the meat is second to none. The amazing part is that for my kids who need a quick lunch, especially during COVID when everyone was in the house and was in my kitchen all day long, right? They're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner here during Zooms and all of that. They needed something quick to grab from the freezer that a kid could actually cook, heat up. And some of your hot dogs and brats and jerkies and all of that is so kid friendly. So anyways, we're going to get into all of that, and I'm super excited to have you on. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Well, why don't you give us a brief background to where, yes, you grew up on the farm or the ranch. Tell us about your experience and why you're doing what you're doing.
That's a good question. So yes, obviously, growing up on a ranch. So my parents, they grew up on conventional dairy and hog operations, and both swore when they left the house that they would never be in agriculture again, or livestock. And here we are, along a lot of years after that statement that they had made that they would, or the declaration, I guess. And they're, they've since retired here a couple of years ago, and my sister and I are kind of have taken the reins, but we've been in it, since we were just little kids. But what's changed about how they got in, and ultimately what led to my life path to this point, has been how we do things now is so much different than how they grew up in kind of this conventional dairy and hog operation. So that, I guess, should cause people to pause just a little bit to say that not all agriculture is equal. There is so much different about what we do, and that's really what has drawn me into still being here today. I'll be 37 here at the end of the week, and I've been here, been involved in the company since I was 8 years old, and it's as the years go on, my passion for it only deepens because of the quality of the products and the people that we get to serve is. I guess as I get older, I just value that more and more and more, and recognize how rare it is in the marketplace as well. And that's ultimately, before the podcast started here, you and I were just kind of going back and forth talking about how the genesis of everything, and that's really where it starts. Is my mom, being a dietitian, was exposed to out of college, was exposed to a lot of the conventional medicines, and just thought this is crazy. We're treating sick people with sickening food. And so that led her down a career path. And my dad being coming out of the fitness industry, owning some gyms and competing in powerlifting and coaching a lot of professional athletes, the two of them coming together under the umbrella of the passion that my dad had for bison in the Wild West, just from a conservation and a cultural standpoint, and just an intrigue in the animal, that has just launched them into this space of regenerative agriculture, as we call it today. Back then, we didn't know what it was. We didn't have that fancy word. It was just raising animals, as we like to say, as nature intended.
Right.
But that is really,
isn't that so crazy that you have to have a term over something that is what nature's intended and what it's supposed to be, right? Regenerative agriculture. And that's a word that people probably hear, but they don't really understand what that is. So why don't you define what that means compared to conventionally raised animals?
Yeah. So conventional is it's not sustainable, and I think sustainable. We say sustainability is a big buzzword in food and production and just life in general. But if you think about it, sustainability. I mean, I'm kind of playing the devil's advocate here, but if you have to sustain something or make effort to sustain something, that's not sustainable, right? Because you remove us from the picture and it's no longer sustainable. So that's unsustainable. Regenerative ultimately is the definition of sustainability in a way that it regenerates itself. It's just constantly compounding without human intervention. And that's ultimately the model which nature is built upon and designed to function. And so we've done a lot of things over the last couple of hundred years as a human species, basically, to intervene and break natural cycles, and caused things to just to become broken, systems to become broken, and then we have to interject. And these are a lot of unintended consequences, but interject chemical fertilizers and chemical, sprays for all means of life, essentially, to oppress in order to get this little outcome that we're looking for, such as corn or soybeans or some monoculture crop or a confinement feeding system for chickens or dairy cattle or pigs or whatever it might be, to be able to produce a singular product. And that's not how nature is designed to function. Nature is designed to thrive off of this diverse complex of relationships that the animals complementing the soil, which is complementing the plants that are growing out of the soil, which are then complementing those that are consuming those nutrients, and then ultimately what is consuming the animals is benefiting from that cycle and that circle of life. So that's ultimately the way that regenerative is, what it's referring to, and the cycle and the functions that are supposed to be in place. And ultimately we just see it as being the best land steward, the best animal steward that we can be, is simply getting out of the way, and finding new revelations of how man has messed it up, essentially, and then trying to repair those and getting out of the way of nature's intended cycles. So that's really, I guess, the coming back to your very first question about why am I still here? What makes me so passionate? It's the conservation. It's the things that we're learning within the regenerative scope. If I was raised in my parents' shoes as they were growing up in a conventional operation, I'd be long gone. I have a deep passion and excitement and intrigue for wild places and wild things, and that is essentially what we are doing in not only just conservation at large of our planet and species that are in danger, such as bison, but doing it in a way that actually feeds people, right? That's the ultimate triple bottom line as we talk about. It has to be a win for the planet, or for the land, the animal, and the people. And conservation is a win for land and animals, but there has to be a people element there. Bison and a lot of these other prey animal species are meant to complement that cycle of earth and soil and vegetative habitat, but it's meant to produce a product that then nourishes a prey or a predator species, such as humans or wolves or bears or whatever it might be. Otherwise, their death, I'm not going to say it's completely in vain, but in a sense, their death would be in vain if their sustenance wasn't put to use, to benefit future life.
Right. What is so frustrating in my business with helping people with their health issues and overcoming autoimmune issues, gut issues, what have you, I always look to inflammation, toxicity, and insulin resistance are pretty much the source of all disease. And when you look at a person's diet, number one, 67% of a child's diet right now is processed food. So it's not even real food, right? And then they go in and they get the processed food, little peanut butter and cracker snack, and it says it's protein filled. Well, that protein's not even going to be absorbed because it's killing your gut, and your gut can't even absorb the little nutrients that's in there. And then you've got gluten and other things in there that are disrupting everything else. So anyway, then you go to the other extreme where there's a whole bunch of studies that say that meat causes heart disease, and be a vegan. And we can get into the environmental impact as well if we have time, but I want to focus more on the nutrition. And some of these studies that are saying meat causes heart disease is more of it wasn't a well done study. These people could be eating McDonald's with the bun and the processed French fries with it and the canola oil that's all in there as well. So my point is, now can you tell us the nutritional value of wild animal meat? And anyone who's been following me, they're probably sick of me talking about eat your wild animal protein. I don't say eat your animal protein. I always say your wild animal protein. Why should we be focused on this wild, grass-fed, grass finished, not grain finished? There's a difference, everybody. Wild animal protein.
In the really short definition, going back to what you just touched on there in the beginning of what you're talking about, basically it's anti-inflammatory meat. 100% grass-fed animals that are finished on a vegetative diet that is native to what would grow on the landscape. Again, this is a good litmus test for people thinking about the way that as nature intended. If you were to walk out in a field or through the woods, what would be available to eat naturally without man having planted it there? There's not going to be corn and soybeans just growing along the path. It just doesn't exist. It might exist in very, very small quantities and rare instances. Obviously, it came from somewhere. But what is the corn and soybean? And I pick on those two because they're just the most prevalent and most well known. But the corn and soybean of today is very, very different than the corn and soybean of 200 years ago. So it's not even the same thing. But those are in their native form, they're complementary, but they're to an animal, but it's such a small percentage of their diet in the wild. It's almost negligible. But if you look at the diet that these animals are consuming and what that does to their nutritional profile within their gut, which then feeds their body, it's a pH, a neutral pH versus an acidic environment, which acidity causes inflammation. So if the pH of the rumen within the animal that's consuming the diet creates the pH of the rumen, the pH of the rumen being acidic creates inflammation, which then creates inflammation in the animal, which we're consuming that animal that's inflamed. So naturally, it's going to cause inflammation in you are what you eat. And there's a study that's coming out that actually just came out this April that hits the nail on the head. It was a scientist, Dr. Stefan van Vliet. He's a Dutch scientist that immigrated here about 15 years ago, and he's doing a lot of really, really high-end studies on human athletes and some of the best athletes in the world, taking some tissue samples, finding out what makes them tick, and then going and taking tissue samples of animals such as bison and finding out what makes them tick and if there's a correlation there. And what he's showing is that a resounding yes, there's absolutely a correlation between we are what we eat. And he said within 36 hours of you eating a certain food, I can take your blood and tell you that you ate that food. Or basically you can draw your blood and tell you everything you ate in the last 36 hours. If what we're ingesting is coursing through our bloodstream, it absolutely has a significant impact on how we feel and just all facets of life, right? So it's very fundamentally, if you look at and think about this, food being from a nourishing standpoint and an anti-inflammatory standpoint, it absolutely matters. And there's real science that supports why one meat protein might be more predisposed to causing something like heart disease. And again, going back to what you said, if it's a McDonald's burger, it could have been 40% soy. That's a thing too. There's just because it's protein doesn't mean it's animal protein either. So there's just a lot going on there. It's very muddied. Best thing that I can say is just eat wild protein, like you said, and you feel the difference. There's no doubt about it. For me, anyway, it makes a significant difference in the quality of life. Going into the veganism aspect, there's no scientific basis for anyone to say that they should be vegan because it's nutritionally superior.
No.
That can't be.
Yeah, the only thing that I feel vegans, they get a temporary benefit, not because of what they're eating, but because of what they're not eating anymore. Usually they're off the alcohol and off of the processed foods, and it's what they've taken out. But then all of a sudden they're anemic and they have brain fog and their hair's falling out and their thyroid is slowing down. A couple things I wanted to just touch on is that I mentioned inflammation, in insulin resistance, and toxicity, and you hit on the inflammation, but the toxicity, you're minimizing your toxic burden. We've got toxic burden, hitting our liver and our kidneys with the 5G and the radiation and the fluoride and bromide and chlorine and all of these things that are hitting us. And then, the spike protein, which I talk about the damage that's done to all of our bodies and burdening our liver. So we need to minimize any other burden, and especially from the foods we eat. And that's why it's more important than ever to eat organic vegetables and be careful with what vegetables you're eating. And Sean, this was the story that I was going to save for you. I actually have two. So I have two kids they're no longer kids anymore. They're in college. So they're out of my control. They're out of my house. My son went off to college and he got the minimum cafeteria plan because he knew that it was going to probably not be great compared to the food that I'm feeding him. He calls me day 2 and he says, Mom, I can't eat this. And he said, I feel like crap and it doesn't even taste good. And then, so now he's got an amazing Northstar Bison delivery, and he does these huge orders. I mean, they're probably one of your biggest orders because I can't believe the amount of food he eats, but it's so reasonably priced, and he loves cooking, and everyone in, all of his buddies are like, oh, what's he making over there? And so now my daughter's off to college and she's going to be on that same plan as well. Thank goodness she's got a kitchen in her first dorm room. But this is the other story. So that's my young population little example. My mom is 80 years old. My parents have never had a weight issue in their life. And people that don't have weight issues tend to think that they can get away with eating anything, right? So she doesn't shy away from sugar and processed foods. Well, she just fell off a horse and she fractured her pelvis and she's not walking. And I said to her, I said, are you ready to do everything I tell you to do? And she said, yes. And so she's taking all of my supplements and she just got her first order from Northstar Bison and she's super psyched. She loves the Bison hot dogs and she loves the already cooked roast, which is fantastic for anyone who doesn't know how to cook. Those two things are fail proof. You can get them and they're fail proof. And she said, so it's been about 2 weeks since her fall. And she said, Sara, it's really strange. Ever since my accident, my brain fog's gone away. I said, because of the supplements, you got rid of the processed foods, got rid of the sugar, you're lowering your insulin resistance, you're lowering your toxicity, you're lowering not just the inflammation in your pelvis where the injury was, but in your brain. It's amazing. And your body is in tune with it. And once it feels the nutrients from real food, it responds. And I talk a lot about this, how this processed food is very addictive and gets your brain all wired in a wacky way. But once you start feeding it real nutrition, it says, please give me more. So I wanted to make sure we touched on that and then the fact that you're talking about the corn and soybean feed for the conventionally raised beef and chicken and turkey, all of those animals, you are what you eat eats. And all of you out there thinking that you are doing a really good job in staying off of the gluten, and even maybe you're staying off of the corn because you heard corn has GMO. Well, what if that corn is in the meats that you're eating, right? And soy is extremely estrogenic. So are you a guy that's losing your testosterone? Are you having estrogen dominance? It might be coming from the meats that you are eating, not necessarily you eating soybeans and being a vegetarian, but actually from the meats that you're eating and the inflammatory fats. So can you talk a little bit about actually the fat profile, omega-3 fats versus the inflammatory omega-6 fats that you find in conventional meats versus the grass-fed?
Yeah. Going back to brain fog, I think this is something that is much overlooked. It's almost difficult to share the level of impact, positive impact from as nature intended, raised, wild proteins. And it's almost impossible or exhaustible to share all of the negative impacts of animals that are raised in unnatural environments, eating unnatural diets. The positives, the omega-3, omega-6 fatty acid profile ratio is significant to the and CLA is significant to the health of our brain. That's the good fats that we need for clarity of our brain. That's a significant contributor, and the impact of a high omega-6 fatty acid profile, it has extremely negative impacts on our arteries and our brain function. So as much as as much as one is negative, the other is positive in feeding us and fueling us. And the cleanliness and the way that our bodies thrive on one fat versus the other is just, it's night and day. And one way that I like to think about, really simplistically, I guess, too, thinking about feeding myself and making good choices is going back to kind of this overarching aspect of inflammation is stress. You can cause stress on your digestive system, and stress in any capacity, for the most part, is very negative and has a lot of negative impacts, not only in environmental stress, but just if we're stressing our body constantly, then what do we expect other than to feel the effects of that throughout our whole body? And going to, you are what you eat. There's a lot of studies out there that have proven that glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, is readily found in the joints and fluids of animals that have consumed that in their diet.
Yeah.
And we take this, miracle bone broth, and throw it in our pot and we drink it. And meanwhile, it's laden with chemicals that the animal consumes. So bone broth is incredibly nourishing, and everyone should be considering it. And myself, I guess I can touch on that really quickly. The value of the missing link, I guess, of bone broth, but it is extremely nourishing and nutrient dense, and everyone should be consuming it. But you have to consider the source of where it came from. Otherwise, you're cooking a toxic stew. But in the last 5 years, I guess I've become very interested in fitness myself and just lifting and that kind of stuff. And every person that I've ever run into at the gym, people come up and ask, "Hey, what are you doing? You're looking great," or whatever it might be. And I talk a little bit about, I don't use any supplements of any kind. It's just an animal-based diet, and good quality protein, and then being intentional about bone broth. And the reason why I talk about bone broth, and I ask them, and a total of 0 times. I'm not sure how many people I don't know, maybe 25, 30 guys in the gym that I've talked to, and gals that I've talked to and had this conversation with. What are you eating? What's your diet look like? What are your goals, kind of a thing. I'm not a health coach by any means, but this is what I live. This is what we do. So we're passionate about it. And they're genuinely asking, curious. And so I say, what are you doing for repair? And obviously rest is huge. I think we're, in our society, we're overcompensated with carbs and caffeine to combat a lack of rest, whether that's getting poor sleep or not enough of it. But then on the other hand is repair for a significant portion of your body is made up of connective tissue. And if we're not feeding that or fueling that with any sort of reparative collagen, what do we expect? And a lot of times those insertions and those connective tissues are the weakest link in our body's ability to repair and recover and be prepared for another lift session or an athletic event or being a mom, and carrying your child around the house, or being an aged person with a broken hip or a broken pelvis or whatever, a broken bone of some sort, and its ability to repair. If we're not feeding it with the nutrients and the things that are nourishing for the body to be able to do what it wants to do, what it wants to express, we can't expect much other than poor results, unfortunately. And that's really what it grieves me so much, is to see what's available in the grocery store and recognize that the majority of our population, this is all they know to choose from, and it's all pretty poor.
Well, 45% of adults in the United States have fatty liver, and that's not the alcoholics. This is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's from insulin resistance and diabetes at the liver level, and it's from this processed foods and the fructose and all of this stuff. And so the one thing, and I love that you're talking about collagen. You're 37, I'm 47. Once you hit 30, the amount of collagen in your body starts diving down, guys. You've got to feed your body collagen. the thing about bone broth, and I'm a believer in bone broth, it can be high histamine. My guess is that grass-fed, grass-finished bone broth is probably lower histamine than, the other bone broths on the shelf. And you have to be careful with where you're getting your supplement or your food, obviously, right? And your source. What's the source of the bone broth? What animal is it? I want to talk about we talked about the fats, the healthy fats versus the omega-6 and inflammatory fats and the collagen. What about the other vitamins and minerals? Because what I've been reading is that really you can't get a better nutritional profile of any food source than a bison. And I, for all of you out there who have never tried bison, you eat it like a steak, you cook it like a beef. I mean, maybe temperatures are a little different. There might be a little things, but it's not anything to be scared of. It's actually more readily available and can be at your door in 3 days from Northstar Bison. But with the soils being so depleted, our fruits and our vegetables are not our source of vitamins and minerals anymore at all. I mean, I eat vegetables and fruit because I enjoy them. I don't look at them on my plate as nutrition. I look at my big piece of meat as my source and base of nutrition. And the other stuff is kind of just to make it taste good and go down. So can you talk about the nutritional profile in addition to the fats, the healthy fats, but more of the vitamins and minerals and how they literally are more than the spinaches and the blueberries and all the super vegetables and fruits that we hear about?
Yeah, I'm glad you're touching on this, and it's fun to hear that what you've been seeing. I'll say this, that at the outset, before I really dive into this, bison is the most storied, historical, culturally significant species within our continent, within North America, and it's the least studied and the least known about, especially nutritionally. The study that Dr. Van Vliet just went into in depth on is the most extensive meat study to date, barring any or regardless of species. So that's really significant. We went from essentially knowing almost nothing about bison other than just some generalized macronutrient data on mostly grain finished bison meat to the most extensive meat study that's ever been done. And so we went from zero to hero essentially, and all this information is just blowing our minds. They're still unpacking it. They're going through a second round of round two, essentially trying to answer questions that came out of this first phase of the study. But the results are absolutely astounding. We thought all along that the omega-3 to 6 fatty acid profile was like a 1 to 4. Like omega-3s were 1 to every 4 omega-6, and that's about what grass-fed beef is. The study just proved that it's 1.7, 1 to 1.7. That's almost as good as salmon, lamb, actually pastured pork raised as nature intended. Pastured pork has almost a 1-to-1 ratio as well. That's one of the better fatty acid ratio profile meats, and it's funny that they're just naturally fat. So obviously that's a good sign that we should that we should be consuming that if it's really healthy for us. So, but bison is significantly better than we thought. But on the nutrient density, yeah. So the way we tell customers is, beef is good, elk is better, and bison is the best. That's the stage. 100% grass-fed beef. Not talking about feedlot finished beef, but 100% grass-fed beef is good. The same for elk is better, and then the same for bison is the best. So the study that Dr. Van Vliet did, they just did a study on the top 1,500 nutrients that they could find, or that the top 1,500, not that they could find, but there's over 40,000 nutrients within bison meat.
Wow.
40,000. I don't know how to wrap my mind around that, but it just boggles my mind. There's there's nothing else on the planet and that's essentially the conclusion that Dr. Van Vliet said is, he's been studying everything from human tissue to kangaroos. I mean, species far and wide all over the planet. And he said, I don't think there's a healthier meat protein than bison on the planet.
And when you think about it, okay, so say you have a bowl of spinach and it's got X amount of milligrams of vitamin C or whatever. Your body is not a vegetable. So how is it absorbing that? Whereas you're going from animal meat in this matrix of vitamins and minerals, the way nature is intended it to be so. And then it goes into your body. Your body's going to assimilate those nutrients much more effectively because it's going from meat to meat, right? Like to like. And that's where I want to get into some of the organ meats and the benefits of eating organ meats. But quickly, I want to touch on the fact that I've talked a lot about amyloid proteins in chicken and conventional beef, and especially now with the spike protein. But my gut was the issue that I started my business, right? So, and I had IBS, I was constipated, I had diarrhea, I was bloated all the time. And it didn't matter if I was eating chicken from a organic chicken or what kind of chicken, I always got E. coli or some sort of pathogen. And what happens, and I've talked about this a couple months ago about the amyloids from foods like chicken and conventional beef strengthen the protein coat known as a biofilm around an infectious bad or virus or bacteria, making them stronger. Those viruses or bacteria or other gut pathogens like E. coli grow stronger, more resilient against the immune system. And then that causes bacterial overgrowth, throws the microbiome out of balance, leads to holes in the intestine, leads to leaky gut. And then the body's more stressed out, right? And attempts to address the amyloid pathogens entering in the bloodstream through the permeability. And then this stress further weakens the gut integrity, increasing the strength of these pathogens. So it's this vicious cycle. So it's not just, and what does that all mean? It's not just about what the nutrients are that you're getting from the good grass-fed, grass-finished, nutrient-dense bison, but it's what the other meats, the conventional meats, can actually be tripping up gut things going on in your body. That chicken might not even have the E. coli, but it's allowing the E. coli that's in your gut to overtake your good bacteria, especially if you've got a compromised gut, which I believe at least 80% of you out there have some sort of leaky gut unless you've done something about it. So that's where it's so important to focus on the nutrient density of this food and what you're not taking in as much as what you're taking in. I wanted to ask you, where does lamb fit on that nutritional profile between beef, elk, and bison?
Yeah, categorically, it would be similar to, in very simplistic terms, I guess it's very different. So that we say, we carry like 9 different species of animal proteins, and they're complementary. Everything has its place. The lamb has a really positive fatty acid profile. The omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is as good or better than anything on the planet. So that's a really positive thing. We look at food too. You can't get nutritional density without time. And bison are one of the oldest aged animals to mature. They're one of the longest to live as well, but it takes them a long time to mature. They're a slow grower. Lambs get harvested in about 6 months. Beef get harvested in about 18 months. Bison get harvested in 30 to 36 months is when they're reaching their maturity and when we're harvesting them. That just equals, and they don't grow quite as fast as beef either. They can get as big, but it takes them much longer. A beef will be matured out at 3 to 5 years old. A bison, it's going to take them till 10 years old to mature, and then they'll be about the same size. But it just takes them that long, and they live 2 to 3 times longer than a beef cow. But their nutritional density is in direct correlation to how much time, essentially, that they're just I use this tree analogy, I guess, for people. There's soft trees that grow really, really fast, and their wood is soft. There are trees that grow really, really slow, like an oak tree, but their wood is extremely dense. And that's the difference between food that's grown quickly can't possibly have the same level of nutrient density than something that is growing slow. So that's the difference between bison and lamb, or bison and beef, and elk is kind of right between beef and bison in the age that it's harvested. So about 2 to 3 years old is the age for a prime elk. So it's interesting, I guess, that the age lines up with nutrient density, as it shows in nutritional panels and studies that are done on the individual species. But yeah, lamb is a good one. Definitely, we enjoy lamb, and we have fantastic lamb. We're just harvesting some lambs here in 2 days again. So our second batch for the year, which we don't have many, but and they sell fast. But that's a really good one for sure.
Well, that's what I love about your company, is that you, and we talked about this before, is that you source your meats, if it's outside of the bison, like the wild salmon and some of the fish. You're very particular, and you mentioned your birthday's next week, so you're a Virgo, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But so you're only going to get the best with Northstar Bison, and I wanted to. We're in a new era with food source. Compared to 4 years ago, your conventionally raised meat is even worse today than it was 4 years ago. Can you talk about what people are eating when they're eating conventionally raised chicken? And especially now with the talk of the vaccines going in these animals, the living conditions, and we talked a little bit already about what they're eating, but some of this stuff is even worse than we could even imagine.
Mm-hmm. I'm still appalled. I know a lot of what goes on. We have a service that we offer to our local community of harvesting their animals and processing them, and it's a custom butcher service as well through our processing facility that we have. And so we get to see all shapes and sizes of the community's animals that they're raising. And there's a very, just looking at carcass to carcass to carcass, there's a very, very, very big spread, a large spread of all different shapes and sizes. And a lot of them you'd look at it and say, well, I don't really want to eat that. And then you look at how it was raised, and then you say, well, I definitely don't want to eat that. But it's obvious just from your mind's eye and what you find appealing or distasteful. And there's so much that goes on in the big ag that is appalling, the amount of loophole type things that go on when it comes to doctoring, and there's some really dark aspects of the food industry that are well accepted. And it's just appalling to us. And honestly, we don't focus a lot of time on those things because we're so busy doing what we do and running in the completely opposite direction. So our minds aren't even thinking of those as being solutions or possibilities or even something to contemplate. And so when we hear the solution for an issue that they're having, it just sometimes is, such as this new vaccine that they're talking about mandating for all livestock, basically the COVID-19 vaccine, it boggles our mind, because the solution is, or the problem isn't the virus, the problem is confinement and stress and the diet and all these things that are just piled on. There's a statistic within the livestock industry that if you run a confinement animal operation, you will have about 10% death loss, and you just pencil that right into your in your business plan as, that's like the acceptable standard. If you're above that, then you're making money, or making more money. But 10% death loss, that's 1 out of every 10. Like it's unbelievable. And it's sad, sad to see and sad to know what's going on, for the welfare of those animals and obviously the consumer. But I guess that goes back to, coming full circle, talking about some of the veganism aspect. I have a lot of respect for people that choose to abstain from those types of living conditions for animals and endorsing that by eating it. But much the same, there are other alternatives. And going back to veganism too, talking about, you might see or feel differently and better for a short term, but your body has so much margin built in that it might be a couple years or a year before you've depleted all that particular nutrient out of your body until you finally feel the effects of the choice 2 years ago to not consume meat protein anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's a delayed reaction, just because our bodies are so remarkable that we don't correlate the two. Then 2 years ago, this started actually 2 years ago, because we're so immediate in our solutions and reaction.
And I'll just, we're almost out of time, but I want to just emphasize that I have vegans in my family that are now eating meat. If you're vegan or vegetarian out there because you've had a bad experience with meat, or you felt like you didn't digest it well, that was the conventionally raised part of the meat. That is my guess. It was either conventionally raised chicken or beef. When you eat bison or even lamb or wild fish, it digests so easily, and your body loves it. And it's actually the carnivore diet is used as an elimination diet for a lot of people, healing for autoimmune issues, thyroid issues, hair falling out, skin rashes, bloat, constipation, leaky gut, all of that. I will recommend, because we are out of time, Sean, I can't believe it.
Oh, no.
That if you are having digestive issues, or you feel like protein is hard to digest, MegaGuard is a herbal supplement that helps with digestion. I take it every day with my meals. I also use the accelerated leaky gut bundle, where the Megaspore, Megapre, and Mega Mucosa heal that leaky gut, which is only going to help you absorb all the nutrients from the meat you're eating. And then when you focus on the wild animal protein, fill in with the vegetables that are not the oxalates or the sulfur. And you can look up the accelerated food guide to list those out. And you start healing your gut very quickly. You get rid of the inflammation, you get rid of the insulin resistance, and you get rid of the toxicity, the 3 things that are probably causing your chronic disease. So Sean, thank you. And in the description below, there will be a link to ordering from Northstar Bison and my coupon, Sara Banta. You can use all one word on their website. I can't remember. The shipping is at the most $15. Am I correct, Sean? And then if you order over a certain amount, it's free shipping. And you get the box that is so professionally packaged. I almost don't want to throw it away. It's so amazing with dry ice, and you could keep it in that box for, 4 or 5 days, and it will stay cold and frozen. So your packaging is second to none, which just shows, how proud you are and in your business, and how seriously you take your business and the quality of your food. So thank you so much for all you do, and for personally feeding my family on a daily basis. And everyone else, if you have not joined my free group coaching, go in there, join, because I will be starting to post more recipes from Northstar Bison and things that you can introduce to your own family. And if you have any health issues for yourself, contact me directly through the website, sarabantahealth.com. happy to put together a protocol for you. And in the group coaching, you will be a part of a like-minded group that's going to support you on your journey of health, and you truly will be empowered. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, across over 100 channels under Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. And like I mentioned before, my goal truly is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So help me with that goal and share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need my help and don't know what to cook and what to eat. They need to hear this one. Join us every week, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. You can use coupon WELCOME10 for 10% off at site-wide at sarabantahealth.com. Thanks for joining us here, and have a great week.